something that's feasible within the summer semester to be able to conduct the research. So you should, get like a projection. I want to work with 50 young people from the ages of 6 to 18.
Okay.
This setting, we're going to work with, we're looking to work with XYZ summer camp, or we're going to research the summer camps that are available. Some of them run from the university. You can, there's some of this research can be conducted right here. Others you may have to go find a community agency. But your goal is to get an age group that you feel is, and you may have some people saying to you, why such a wide range? Because you're saying 6 to 18. That's why you overeat at 6 is not why you overeat at 18, right?
Mhm.
That's like a whole world of difference. So you may opt to narrow it even further and go to adolescent obesity, or you may go to early childhood obesity. You may need to even narrow your focus even more in order to be able to isolate the psychological factors that are going into why these people are overeating, which are very different. So I guess because I've worked with adolescents for so long, I would obviously go with the adolescent group because I know them very well. But it's up to you and your strengths as a researcher to determine which group you should choose. So I would even focus it even further, so that way you can get a group that has more common things in common, that then it'll be easier for you to then isolate maybe some variables or factors that cause this group to overeat. So those are just some suggestions, but the topic is fascinating, and I think it's very relevant and it's very important. And yet, narrowing it down to what that research question is, which is, I think, essentially why are adolescents overeating, and what can be done to put adolescents in a healthy lifestyle so that they can have a lifetime of health and wellness instead of a lifetime of problems and obesity, and even morbidity and death that can result from, as you saw, the young man killed himself straight up, like, because it's the only way I can describe it, because he just did not take care of himself at all. For someone that has such a serious illness, he just did not take it very seriously. So, and once you've established that, then the methodology is very important. We need to know what these research techniques are going to be. Like, are you going to do interviews, like a pre-interview, then do a treatment, like maybe prescribe some sort of like regimen or something like that, and then a post test to see if the treatment was successful or not. Are you going to measure it based off of how many pounds they've lost, or are you going to measure more on behavioral acquisition, like choosing the whole pyramid instead of like the top of the pyramid with all the greasy stuff, like, how are you going to measure success of whatever treatment that is you're implementing, or are you going in that route? So there's a lot of questions that need to be answered, and you're presenting tomorrow, right?
Yes.
Whoa. So you have a very narrow amount of time to address those questions, but you must get that way because you're going to get grilled, because the topic is fascinating. Everyone is invested in it, but it's how do you then take such a large issue and bring it into, like, okay, this is this huge global issue and specifically a problem in the United States. I'm going to cut off this sliver of this problem. I'm going to deal with this narrow population. I'm going to do these interventions. I'm going to measure whether they were successful by this pre-test and post-test, and then I'm going to come up with my findings. And I expect that the intervention that I implement is going to be successful in at least 75% of participants. You can throw that out there. It may end up being successful in 10%. That's okay. That's what research is about. It's not a formula, but you can try at least to get it to be something successful. So thinking through how you're, and really condensing the background to a portion, but only a portion of your PowerPoint. The rest of it you have to flesh out the rest of the PowerPoint with your research question, your methodology, and your hypotheses, and your expected findings. And if you do that, then you're in good shape. Do you have an opportunity to contact your mentor?
Yes.
Okay, so you need Houston, You have a problem.
Okay.
You need to go and contact that mentor and say, okay, I'm going to present. What time are you presenting tomorrow?
4:40.
Okay, good. So you got the last slot. You have the whole day to fix it. So this is good.
Okay.
But you say between now and then, I need to do these things.
Okay.
So what are your suggestions on making this a successful presentation? And hopefully your mentor will give you some solid ideas. Now, was this a topic that you developed yourself, or was this a topic that you're already jumping into their own research initiative? Like, how did this come up? Is this your topic? Okay, so that's why it's harder sometimes when it's your topic, because the students that are just jumping on the bandwagon of somebody else's ongoing research. I mean, it's easier in the sense that the professor is already determined you're going to be testing this group of students, and you're going to be doing this, and you're going to be doing that, and it's already just basically directing the show, and then the students are just conducting the research. But it is more fascinating when you have your own topic because you're invested in, and it may be that if the quality of research is so high that it's something that you can continue on in your graduate work and beyond because it's something you're invested in personally.
Okay.
And so I think longer term yield from that type of project is greater because it's your project, you own it, right? Versus the short-term gain, it's easier to conduct somebody else's ongoing project, but do you have the investment in it? Do you have the commitment? And is this something you're going to want to continue after the summer's over? Maybe not. And so I think your topic has the potential to be something that can have a longer trajectory of fruitful research coming out not only for this summer, but beyond. But the question is, how do you present this to the committee in such a way where they're convinced that you have something that's feasible to be conducted within the summer term? And I think if you look at affiliating or considering any of the ongoing camps that are at the university already or in the vicinity, in neighboring areas, you could find your target population, find those and I think you're good because you made you gave various gradations of what obesity is. But now you're going to have to choose. Are you going to just choose just obese beyond like 25 BMI body mass index and upward is obese? So anyone that falls into that range is going to be in your study. Or are you going to narrow it to mildly obese to are you going to only look at the people that are morbidly obese? Like which target group are you going to look at? Because I would think that there is a difference between someone who is slightly overweight and is considered obese. Because there's some people that those charts are interesting because when you look at them and they say, well, according to the chart, I'm obese, you're like, you're not obese. What's going on? They don't look it. But then there are other people that undeniably, they're obese, morbidly so, like really overweight. And so, is that going to be your target population? Are you looking at people that you feel that you can turn the tide and make significant change? Because when someone's 400 pounds, there's a whole lot that needs to be done to get that person into a healthy weight range. Whereas if you are, in a weight range that you're overweight, but it isn't that much, like you're 50 pounds, or you're 25 pounds, whatever, then you're less of a battle to get to normal weight range than the person who is 200 pounds over their target weight. And so I would think that your strategies are different between those two populations. That's just my guess. Because one group with exercise and diet can pretty much handle it in a timely fashion. And another group, and you're going to get some results that are quantifiable. Because one group, 10 pounds is a significant loss. And with the other group, 10 pounds is nothing. Because they drop in the bucket, now you're 400, now you're 390 pounds. I don't see the difference. And then they're qualitatively, their life is not going to be very different. And so I really don't think that group for the time that you have in the summer is enough. If there's enough time to make a difference, although you want to make a difference in that overweight group, but I just don't think that there's enough time. So I would suggest maybe having a range of body mass index that you feel that you can actually see some results with some sort of intervention that you're going to create versus tackling something that really they need a year a whole year of healthy living and exercise and or surgery to get them to like actually see some dramatic weight loss.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think that group is your target group for this study. So these are just some suggestions I'm throwing out there. Maybe your mentor has a totally different mindset, and you know it will take you in a different direction. But you know, those are some suggestions that I would make just to make it more in line with what we're expecting for the presentation in terms of the format. And if you do that, because your topic is fascinating, if you do that, I think you'll do great. Dan, do you have any suggestions for him?
Oh, can I ask a question? Because I was intrigued by it. Were there any demographics for who was any particular ethnic group that
Oh yeah.
became more obese than over the other, or was straight average across?
I didn't put anything specific. I should have, but you brought up a great point there. I definitely have to do that.
It might be even a way to narrow her group even further. Yeah. You may say this is a specific plague, let's say in the African American community.
Yes.
And say I'm going to narrow my study. You know, it may or may not be feasible to do it that way, but you may want to consider. Or I'm not going to turn away participants, but I'm going to have a specific focus on. You know, because if you go to a program that's run out of a predominantly Black neighborhood, you're most likely our programs. Yes. She can go up to North Campus and do a study in our program, and she has all the African Americans she ever wants. And 90% of the students in our program, maybe more, so are Black. Okay, so you don't need to go that far. I'm keeping it real.
Only I asked because my parents, they're from the Carolinas, and I hear a lot of stuff. They talk about big bone and talk about that's nothing but baby fat. But I have my level, they're obese, and I that what you say is very intriguing because I heard the genetic part of it, and I'm wondering. And you said it didn't happen overnight; it happened like a good portion over time. So I'm wondering, is there something, because you know we grew up on slave diet, you know, and we grew up on slavery. And we moved from, my mother was part of the first Great Migration that moved from the south to the north. And so you know they had to forget about picking cotton. You know they grew up rough, so they ate rough. But then it came to the city and all the conveniences was there for us. So I found that very intriguing because I was looking at my life right there, and my mom and my aunts, all of them.
Definitely.
Healthy women, if you want to say it that way. But
and you're right. It is cultural, and it's cultural and it's genetics. And I always feel that genetics always goes back to culture anyway, because you have an isolated population that eats a certain way over generations. That thing is going to be genetically inscribed. You know, that's it. To me, it all goes back to culture, because people sometimes want to see. You see, the races are different. Why does this race always have diabetes and this race has sickle cell anemia? When you go back, sickle cell anemia has a slave history to it. It was all that horrible diet that the slaves ate, and you see that's those mutations came from that. So you're onto something, and it would be even more interesting to me. It'd be a fascinating study if you decide to make that your focus and look at specifically African Americans and dietary changes. Although you're not going to turn any away from participants, you're going to conduct your study in a camp that is known in a part of the city that is predominantly African American population. Right there, your study is going to be predominantly that. And so it would be very interesting, because I think you're right, it's cultural factors. And if you grew up hearing that you're big bone, then
that's accepted.
Then that's accepted. Oh, I have a story for that though.
Okay.
I have a story for that. And then we're gonna get to yours. But I have a story for that. You know that you know, in our group, right, as the vast majority of our students are African American. So there was this one, and we only had like 2 Caucasian students of the whole talent search cohort, like 500 kids, 2 Caucasian students, right? And it was funny because one of them was like, she was always like, am I fat? Am I fat? You know, like doing that all the time, right? And you know, it's getting annoying to people because it's like, you're obviously not fat. You weigh like 115 pounds. Get over it, right? And so, you know, one day I'm just listening to her say it, so I chime in. I'm like, oh, you're not fat. You look great.
Then I meet my mother. We can get some food in here. Yeah, that's.
Oh, but you know, guess what she said though? And she was talking, I think, to Greg and them, asking the
Oh
question.
no!
And then I passed by and I said, oh, you're not fat. She go, she can't answer. She's big bone. Yes, no, she did not say that. Yes, she did. And for the longest time, it was a running joke because I was big bone.
Yeah.
And I'm like, wow, if I'm big bone, your mind is warped. But then what did we find out?
Okay.
Stepfather ran her to the ground. Basically, it was like,
wow,
you're nothing, you're crap. Get your stupid fat ass out of the way. The television set, I need to watch TV. Ran her into the ground. Like, this was like the ground, and he just took her and he just shined the ground with her hair and her head and everything. He was just horrible with her.
Wow.
And so she had this complex, like, I'm horrible, I'm obviously too fat, whatever, because this guy kept saying all this stuff. So when we figured that out, we're like, you need to get out of that toxic hole of a family that you got, because this is clearly not helping you.
Right.
But just the fact that she could like disqualify what I said, I had no right to give an opinion. I'm too big to say anything. Well, we just cracked up because I don't know about you, but I don't really think I look like I'm too big to give up an opinion. And if there was any such thing as anyone being too big to give an opinion, Lord have mercy. I was just cracked up. I was like, I'm big bone. And my brother almost he weighs over 300 pounds. And he heard that, it's like, wow, you big bone. I don't know what's wrong with me.
Okay, right.
Like,
you got to be
we were just cracking up. So, you know, it is cultural. It is there's a lot of there are cultural factors, and we make a very rich cultural study. Of course, you're looking at it from the psychological angle, but you can't ignore the sociological components because it's there. And so, if you decide to even narrow the focus even further like that, I mean, there could be some very interesting research coming out of this project. I think it would. And I think it'd be personally meaningful to you to make this a focus. I think you're onto something that I think would be very fruitful research and something that we would want to hear about.
Okay. Yeah, I've seen cases where, like we talked about in communication class, that they talk about how they treat people who are a certain weight class in a medical profession than other people. Like if you're overweight, they treat you as if you're about to have a bypass. I mean, it's funny, but we were discussing that in communication class, and I thought that was amazing that you have age discrimination, but you have discrimination on that level, and I think that plays a role in. I mean, nothing to do with sort of your research, but I think it's fascinating because there's so many different factors, and we all take so much for granted, and because we're all kind of thin in kind of society, and my family has dubbed me bag of bones because for the same reason, well, big bones, I'm a bag of bones to encourage me to eat more. So so it's very, to me, I think it's very intriguing. I think you have people's attention, and you speak very well, I have to say.
Thank you.
Yeah. Definitely knowledgeable. Definitely knowledgeable about your subject. That's definitely important. So, congrats. I will say condense and put those factors in. There were some things that I would say, like if you put a fluent on one side, it was a capital A, it should have been a lowercase a. Little things like that. I think you had to wait on one slide, WT, like the abbreviation, I would spell it out.
Okay.
Cycling was missing a G, I would add it. But it is very, I think one of the things I liked about it as well, the presentation is very colorful. It's well put together. You've got pictures, you've got, a lot of things to make it very interesting. The Cro-Magnon man slide, though, I mean, I don't know because we never got the chance to see it like this, but the Cro-Magnon man slide, like, all the font was very little.
Okay.
So you may want to consider, like,
making it bigger, definitely.
If possible.
Okay.
Because that I mean, maybe when we projected it wasn't a problem, but on your computer screen it was like
tiny.
Yes. Okay, Danny.
Good point.
Oh, okay.
It's
that
time.
time
Let's see if
already.
it works.
It's that time. Okay. I prayed that it worked.
If not,
You would have.
I didn't even say move over your laptop. This may not work.
Okay, well, I could try to improvise. Is there to get it bigger? Like I think
I'm just scared of even touching this thing and making it like it's really bad.
Okay, that's their full screen. So
Okay, I'll be your clicker for the day.
Okay, thank you. Do you mind if I'm recording this?
Go ahead.
Because do re mi fa sol la ti. Okay. All right. Thank you. Good evening, distinguished panel. Yes, my name is Britt, and I decided to choose the subject of greener aviation. It's a pathway to carbon-free emissions in aviation. Funny how this journey began, because my abstract was so extensive I didn't know which direction I was going into. However, I by chance took a botany class in which I found the shocking fact that most people know is that we have an element of something called carbon sequestration, which is basically running our planet into the ground. This is causing a lot of imbalances in the earth, in which we have greenery that we take for granted, and that grant produces life-giving oxygen versus getting rid of the CO2 emissions that are in the air. And the problem with that is we're deciding to choose manufacturing of petroleum oils and burning those oils over keeping perfect balance. Now, this is nothing new, okay? Into the actual segment of the presentation, I'm going to be discussing with you about some of the things that, how we are impacted by this and what potential solutions are there, which are already workable. And my topic is green aviation because this industry is doing things about it. It's just that it's not moving quick enough to the marketplace. Next slide, please. Okay, as we well know, the air traffic, most of the air traffic that we're seeing is coming, most of it is coming from aviation. And the biggest problem with that is we have, to quote, a lot of people are starting to use air traffic as opposed to using normal traffic. And this is getting to be one of our biggest part of our CO2 emissions with our newest technologies that are moving forward. The problem with it is our technologies are just not moving into the market seamlessly because there are certain things such as the cost effectiveness of making an aircraft green. You just can't say, oh, this is a great idea, let's make it green, let's do biofuels into that, and it's a done deal. Market has to consider factors, see if it can weigh into its end all total thing what they can provide. Can we go to the next slide, please? Next slide. Okay, where are we now? We are at the precipice of disaster because we have $31 billion, 18 billion of it abroad is invested in fuel costs. Every time a plane takes off at MIA, they have something called ground-to-air takeoff. Those exhaust fumes are contributing to the CO2 emissions I stated earlier. And each of these represents a potential dollar figure that goes into our atmosphere every time a plane takes off. And we have to pay these costs. In addition, contrawise to that, we have to, in addition, pay for the damage we cause from where our plants and our trees suffer from that kind of emission. It's causing global warming, causing certain green areas to become arid, dry, and then not be able to produce oxygen. Okay, we'll go to the next slide, please. Okay, green energy is great, but the big but is our feed crops that we get from biofuels are competing with petroleum. In addition, which the petroleum is competing with the biofuels, and I'll explain that in a moment. Anybody know what phosphorus is? It's a basic compound, and unfortunately, that compound exists in the ground soil. That same phosphorus is used to treat gasoline to produce jet fuels. We are at a precipice where we're reaching almost in 50 years, they've extrapolated that we're going to run out of phosphorus. This is where we're going to have a big end game for biofuels versus petroleum fuels. In addition to the feed crops that we're talking about corn versus soybean versus algal biofuels, which we'll discuss in a minute. The problem with that is we're using these forest lands and these lands that we used before, and we set up these big crop farms that just generate biofuel crops such as corn, and we're defeating the purpose of having greenery, increased greenery plants. We're reducing the green base of this planet due to overcrowding of stuff that really is redundant. We'll go to the next slide, please. So what can we do about it? Next slide. Okay. My research project has a lot to do with increasing the aircraft fuel economy by offsetting the things that impact an aircraft. Everything that when an aircraft takes off, it produces a maximum amount of thrust, drag, weight, and lift. And all of this plays an important role of how much fuel the plane consumes and how much gasoline or how much jet fuel it burns. If we can find a way to minimize the effect these forces have on the planes, thus increasing the maximum aircraft fuel economy, we can find ways to save how much fuel we burn, thus eliminating or reducing the amount of CO2 emissions in the atmosphere. Next slide, please. I propose that we have that we go about it from a different range of areas in which to accomplish a particular goals. We use an amalgamation of certain materials, make better designs such as solar panels on the aircraft, which is not actually, there's no regulation for it to be installed, but they are putting it into effect. And algae biofuels. Next slide, please. My topic has to do with a lot of collaboratives, and those collaboratives are tied networks between Siemens, which is a corporation, Pratt & Whitney, which has to do with the power plants, and the power plants are basically the engines of the jets that get them to go in the air. Without it, you can't get a plane in the air. NASA, which is number one at providing research for most aviation industry, because the biggest problem that aviation is having is the cost for doing said research. So we need NASA to continue to do what they're doing so they can share with aviation, the industry, and aviation can then incorporate this to market. The last tier of it is to have university-based research, in which my proposed project is a part and parcel that ties all these collaboratives in. Next slide, please. We're looking at distinguished faculty that's doing current research. Dr. Faye Collier is doing the environmental responsible aviation with NASA, and his people are doing some great work at making sure that they can reduce something called nitric acid oxide emissions. And nitric oxide emissions are possible producing CO2 emission as well. Dr. Jayanta Kapat at University of Central Florida is responsible for producing more efficient wind turbine to produce power generation and aircraft engines, power plants. And he's also experimenting with algal biofuels to make sure that the market can reasonably use it. Dr. Larry Bell is at University of Houston, and he's providing what's known as space architecture, which is an exciting field which designs where you notice when they send things up to space, things have to be lighter. They have to be lighter because in order to get things up, less heavy means that you can move stuff to the moon and back or to space and back for less cost. So he basically has a program that shows engineers on how to make, if you will, lighter structure environments with minimum space. Because if you look at a space station and you look at a building down on Earth, one thing is really on the diet. Okay, looking at Dr. Professor Sergio Pellegrino of Caltech, he's doing great work because he's finding ways of how to make aircraft cheaper. And if we can make aircraft and spacecraft cheaper, we can thus eliminate a lot of the onboard costs that industry has to face when they're trying to design these biofuels. Now, in our next few slides, we're going to actually talk about my specific aim of what we're going to spend our energy on. Please, next slide. This is a specific aim. The specific aim is what you're looking at this is the actual power plant engine of a 747. And what you're looking at, we're focusing on, is this is an inner casing of something called a combustor. This is sort of like your car when you turn the key in the ignition, that spark plug gives an explosion in your engine. That engine has to produce a certain chemical action to produce very volatile temperatures in this area. One of the things that Dr. Kapat is finding at UCF is that biofuels are usable, but unfortunately, the residue from some of the oils being used in these engines, they have actually put this to the test, are creating some kind of engine destabilization. So you get a lot of heat in a very small place. If it's destabilized, it's a potential for a crack in the case of impossible an explosion, which would defeat the purpose because you would have more pollution than you would solve. So my research topic has a lot to do what kinds of ways that we can make greener aviation, to include finding ways to retrofit, if you will, filters or part that can help make that possible. One of the other problems that they're facing is there's a huge issue with overheating. So they would have to spend an immense amount of money to cool down the engine. Next slide, please. So my basic concept is to test and redesign the combustion chambers, these parts in their turbines, and to maximize the use of algal biofuels. The next build files is to explore all different concepts of biofuel, to include algal biofuels, to see which one wins over top. Design cheaper ways to manufacture these applications in their parts. so that when it all comes together, it's not too pricey. And to mature these useful applications as a vanguard so that they pass the NASA's technology readiness levels. Nothing goes ahead unless it reaches NASA's technology readiness programs because NASA is doing primarily most of this research. And I believe that by involving NASA and streamlining with university researchers, with the corporations, as they pass along that information, I believe most of it will be passed into the marketplace. Next slide, please. Okay, next slide. Okay, these are some staggering statistics. This is already happening. We have 70% of jet aircraft in service today, 70% more fuel efficient because we're using biomass product. So this thing works. It's not something that is a wish or someone's wish that they have. 78% of us globally are traveling, 79% in other trans, as I stated earlier. 78% of us. We're talking about more than 3/4 of the planet is getting around by aircraft. So if we reduce that number of aircraft emissions, we can substantially reduce CO2 emissions. 80% of these alternate fuels, particularly sustainable biofuels, have been identified as excellent candidates to helping achieve the industry's targets. So we're on the right track. We just need that last push to get it to marketplace. And lastly, 80% of aviation CO2 emissions are emitted from flights over 1,500 kilometers, which is sort of like traveling from here to New York. And how many times does that happen? So if we can find better ways to get these planes to fly and fly more efficiently with the use of algal biofuels and these different amalgamation of technologies, the answer may or may not be one of the others, but as my mom would quote, put more irons in the fire, you'll have more headway in the moment. And lastly, everybody wins. I think this is a real good topic that I think is something that most of you probably agree is something to go with, but I think it has more so to do with the direction in which it's to be had. I'm kind of reminded of Dr. Mcnair's as a principal example of why I undertook this research. And Dr. Mcnair is an excellent candidate because this man was not just a scientist. He was not only just an astronaut. Unfortunately, we no longer have him as of 1986. But this man devoted his life and his study for a passion in life. And I don't know if you noticed, but he was a karate expert. He had his black belt. And to me, that's amazing that he was able to do all those things and wrap it up in a nice little tidy bow. My ambitions is Dr. Mcnair is an excellent example, and I can by no means compare myself to him. But the one thing I do know is that I'm a person who's I love learning. I'm a blank slate. And if you give me half the chance, I think I won't make you disappointed. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you, distinguished panel. Thank you so much for your time. Horrible.
No, actually, yeah. So this is what Mcnair is all about. That type of presentation, really and truly. You did an outstanding job.